Tell me if this sounds familiar. You get called by a recruiter about an open position, and they go into a phone screen, and then they say, congrats, I would love to put you through to our hiring manager. Would you be open for an interview next week? And you're like, great. But then that interview turns into like a full day of panel interviews, multiple people in different departments. And then there's also 2 different projects that they want you to turn in. And don't forget there's a case study, and oh yeah, and lest we not forget, there was also probably a one-way interview, a personality assessment, multiple other case studies, and a BuzzFeed quiz to see which Friends character you most likely are. Okay, that last one might not happen, but I feel like I have had some people tell me that they've literally been sent things like BuzzFeed quizzes as part of the process. Bottom line, the job interview process has gone mad. There's a reason why I now call it the gauntlet, because it's just like one challenge after another. So, should you go through it? And when is enough enough? And if you do decide to compete, how do you keep your stamina and sanity while making it through this process to, get a new job? Okay, so real quick, if we haven't met, my name is Cassandra. I am a career strategist and speaker, and I help people find and keep jobs they love. So let's first briefly talk about why. Why are we now in this place where there are so many rounds of interviews? And like, not even rounds of interviews, interview components, right? So a couple of reasons are because of the times we live in. One piece of research I saw said that companies kind of hired so quickly during the Great Reshuffle that now they're regretting some of their decisions, especially some of those people also made the employee made a fast hiring decision, realized it wasn't for them, now left, they have an opening again. And so they're a lot more cautious now and wanting to take their time. The second reason that I also found that's very interesting is Zoom makes it all it's so much easier to schedule that it's like, oh yeah, let's have a meet with 2 more people. Let's put those other 2 people on their calendar. Not for once thinking about like, yeah, that's 2 more people in your work day, but this person on the other end now has to find another hour or 2 where they tell their work that they're busy, or they have to find a babysitter for their kids, or like they're not taking that into consideration. And then also a reason that's been around for a very long time of why companies kind of go a bit overboard in the interview process is because hiring is expensive. This is something that the candidate isn't always thinking about. Sometimes as a candidate, we sit there and think, well, yeah, they hire me and they paid me a salary, but there's often $2,000 to over $10,000 that goes into each new hire, right? Because there's training involved, there's paperwork, there's all that cute swag they give you at certain companies. All of that costs money. And so if they're going to dump all that money into you when you start, they want to make sure they're making the right decision. So that one is sort of reasonable, but it also doesn't give credence to why they can go into like 8 different rounds with 4 case studies, etc. Plus, employers can host multiple rounds of interviews because they want to see and clarify if you're the right person for this position, if you'd get along with the team, if you might be better for a different position. There's a lot of other factors involved, but I will say none of these take into consideration that at the end of this crazy process they've created is an actual human being with a life that is now trying to squeeze in this whole other thing into what they already do. So while I think more than 1 interview, more than 2 interviews is fair, when is enough enough? When should you throw in the towel and just go like, this job is not worth it? Honestly, I think there's a lot of contributing factors that are always going to like change what this would be. I'm going to give you some numbers just for like quantifiability, but I also am fully aware that if it is your dream job and it's a VP position and you're on interview 7 and they say, we want you to do 1 more and you really want to work at that company, you're not going to go, no, I said 7 was enough. I'm not doing it. Like, we all know that's not going to happen. But in general terms, I would say 3 to 5 is fair. If one of those is a phone screen, if one of those is like meeting with people on the team, one is with the hiring manager, one's a follow-up with the hiring manager, and one is a final, 15 to 30 minute sit down with the with the head of the department, right? Okay, great. Like things like that, I go, yeah, that's about 5. Now, did they need to take place over 5 weeks? Probably not. Or 3 months? Probably not. Timing and the amount are two issues that one we can kind of solve and the other we have no control over. So I think 3 to 5 is not unheard of. I think 1 project is not unheard of. But again, it depends on the position, it depends on the company, it depends on what you want, right? If it's an admin assistant for a large corporation, that should not be more than 2 to 3 interviews. If it is a position at, if it's an executive VP position at a large corporation or a startup that's sort of on the rise, that's going to be more interviews and they're going to be more in depth. It just depends. But bottom line, have your boundaries, know what's worth it and not worth it to you. And hopefully these next tips will help you kind of figure out how to deal with this and if you want to move forward. Okay, so how do you survive the job interview gauntlet? Well, first, if you are working with a recruiter, I don't think there is anything wrong with politely asking how many steps there are in this hiring process. So basically, if a recruiter is your main point of contact at the company, you can ask for a timeline and how many steps there are. That should be able to give you a little bit better picture of the pacing and help you see, is this something you want to jump into at all? Again, if this is your dream job, a job you have been waiting for, you can't believe they called you for it, whether you applied or not, you might be willing to go through 9 rounds. But if this is a job that you kind of applied to on a Sunday afternoon because you were kind of mad at your current job and you needed something else, and now they've called and they have 9 rounds, you're like, I don't know if that's worth my time. So asking ahead for how many steps there are can be helpful. Next, have a master study guide for all of your interview answers. Now, I have a document for this in my impressive interview kit, but bottom line, you want to have a place where you are storing your general answer to tell me about yourself and all your anecdotal star answers. So tell me about a time there was a conflict. Why are you interested in this position? Tell me about your greatest achievement. You want a place to store all of those so that when they call and go, great, they really loved you and they're moving you on to the next round, you're not having to go back and remind yourself again, oh, how did I say my answer to tell me about yourself? Or also to be able to keep track of what anecdotes you've already given. Some places won't want to hear the same example 4 times. So if you have one example of great customer service and now you're in a meeting with another person, you can say, I talked about this last time, but can I share that with you? Or would you you might want to, it would just probably be best to just have a separate answer. So if you have that all kept together in some sort of master study guide, master key for you, if you will, you're not having to take more time and more exhaustion going through that. The other thing I would suggest keeping on hand is a list of questions you have and to keep adding to this, because as you go into interviews, certain questions are best answered by certain people. I have many videos on the questions you should ask in an interview and theory behind it. And the interview I have with the people that would be my potential coworkers, at the same level as me, I'm going to ask them different questions than I would ask the person who would be my direct supervisor. So keep that list of questions going, and then you can kind of choose from that list as you're going through these interviews, which ones go best for which group. Then after each interview, take a second to debrief. What did you talk about? Do you have new questions that come up in your mind based off the conversation? How was the vibe, if you will? Did you like them? Do they seem like people you could work with? How do you think you did? Is there anything you think you could improve an answer on? What did they emphasize? It sounds like a lot, but honestly, in 10 minutes, you could kind of jot this all down to go, okay, I have to remember to focus on this next. Or, oh wow, they spent a lot more time talking about external stakeholder partnerships than I expected. I've got to find a few more answers for that if I move forward. And along with that, keep track of who you talked to, right? Who have you met with? And then in terms of projects and case studies, Know and politely express your boundaries around these things. Now, as I said before, I have made other videos specifically on interview projects, and I will put a link to that here and then the description box below. We go into a lot more details on like what you can do to manage those, or should you say no to them. But know your boundaries and then let them know your boundaries. So if they want you to do some giant project, let them know, I will only be able to spend 4 hours on this project, or I can give you everything up to this step, but after that, that's my own intellectual property, right? And I'm not going to hand that over for free. Now you're going to have to work on saying that in a polite manner, right? But it's okay to have certain boundaries of how long you're willing to work, the scope of what you'll work on, and what will be delivered. And finally, schedule in time to decompress. Honestly, this style of interviewing is basically a second job or a side hustle for a lot of people. It takes a lot of time. It interrupts your regular routine. So take a minute here and there to decompress after these interviews. You might not have tons of time, but even 15 minutes where you're like, I'm gonna pour myself a glass of wine and just sit for a minute and just go, whew, that's over. Or I'm gonna, read a chick lit book for a little bit and just like zone out on something kind of silly. Great. Like, give yourself some rewards to restore so you can gear up for that next round. But bottom line, don't be afraid to ask how long this process could potentially take and the steps involved, and then politely share your boundaries. So hopefully that helps you. If you need more help on the project and case study part in particular, I have a video for you here, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.